I've never been there because it's weird. No, we're really close.
Give or take. Well, I live on the outskirts.
Oh, okay.
You're so right.
That's a good one, Andy. That's a good one.
That is the question.
Hey, Wendy. No, I'm just like, is it picking up everything I'm saying? And the answer is yes. Well, I would assume it's all the same. Otherwise, I would get it.
All right, guys. So we can start discussing. Does anybody have maybe a conclusion for a specific attribute, something we should use more or less of, something we should spend less time on, or maybe you have questions you want to know?
I really want to know how the cakes turned out.
How the cakes turned out?
Yeah, because if they, the recipes didn't turn out well, then I don't want to use it.
That's fair.
Yeah, you really should have brought cakes for us to test.
You're right. I don't have an oven in my dorm, otherwise I absolutely go for the one.
Well, we don't know what elevation the cake is being cooked here. Like
That's fair.
recipes change and
That's
like
fair.
cake elevation.
The environment is important. Is the environment stable between all the trials? I like that. That's a really good thing to consider. Okay?
How do you get 1/3 of an egg?
That is an excellent question. Josh,
How much is everything going to cost?
how much is it going to cost? I think that is reasonable to consider. I mean, if we talk about how we perfect a recipe, then we focus on cost later. It's probably from the business standpoint. But yes, cost is very important.
What temperature are you putting the cakes at?
What temperature, and is it consistent? That's a really good question.
Are you cooking one cake with every order? Are you cooking multiple? Are you cooking cupcakes?
There you go. Yeah, how are the orders? What do the orders actually have? That's good.
Like, what are the size and shape of the pans? Because that'll affect what the cooking
Yes,
is.
size and shape of the pans. That's very important. Very important. Actually, well, I'll talk about that later. Okay, does anybody have conclusions they wanted to share before we continue? So, because the more important thing we wanted you guys to talk about is if you've heard of MEAs, your model eliciting activity, sometimes it's more important for students to really consider the context of the question before they even advance on the data. We want them to really consider what factors go into play and really consider why they're working on what they're working on and if they even have enough information to work on the problem. So sometimes that's actually more important to begin with. You guys had some really great ideas. I was walking around, I heard a lot about the things that haven't been said just now. So that's great. So, things that we thought of. Are they all the same flavor? I forget who said that, but that's absolutely important. If it's a different flavor, then you're going to need a different recipe to begin with. And then if they are the same flavor, are they the same brand? So Dill's Sweet Chocolate Cake with Duncan Hines is different than Betty Crocker. All right, pan size consistency. So this is actually, it directly correlates to what we did with Lubrizol. So they gave us their recipes for certain chemicals that they wanted to synthesize with all these compounds that go into them. And then we gave them recommendations for, okay, here's how much longer you should be cooking each of these things. Cooking is a loose word there, but here's how much longer you should be cooking them in your tanks. And they said, after our check-in in the middle, they were like, we use multiple different tanks considering the size of the batch. So we want you to subclassify by tank and then give us time recommendations for that. Different pan sizes. If you have a 9x9 as opposed to a 9x13 cake, you're going to bake it differently, right? Different times. So that was actually really relevant. Is the temperature consistent? I forget who said that, and elevation too. Very good, because absolutely it's going to change the cooking time. If it's low enough, you can't even make the chemical reaction occur to bake the cake. And then a big thing to consider is typos. We actually did have some things in our data that they gave us we could tell was a typo, so we did say the information wasn't valid and we couldn't draw a conclusion from it. And of course, how do you get 3 1/3 of an egg? It's actually a really good question.
So then these were the results that we had found. This is just part of our data because we took the Excel that Linda had made and then we made a Google Sheets. And so most of the time we were able to just kind of get results on time time. We had worked on lot size a little bit, but we weren't able to finish it. So, as Chris said, like, we didn't show, like, the data that they had given us because we didn't know if we could. But what we did was, there was, like, a column that was plan time, and then there was another that was actual. So we took the difference of those, and then we made histograms to kind of see where all the times kind of lie, and where, like, the tallest, like, bar was at, was where we kind of figured out this is overall where they should, like, decrease their time or add to their time and kind of create something like that. And then there was somewhere, there were, like, different sizes, so like SFI 1036, there were batches that was like 80,000, 105,000, and 130,000, 175,000. So like we had to break it down into that, and then there were ones that had different tanks to it, so obviously the tanks will make them different as well, so we had to include that. And then there were some where there just was not enough trials for us to actually come to a conclusion, so that's why we have insufficient data.
There were also quite a few times where the data was way too spread out in order to draw conclusions. So when we graphed it, it was pretty uniform. There would have been thousands of outliers to the point where there wouldn't even have been made sense to come up with any conclusions. So that's another reason why we have some insufficient data in there as well.
Yeah, we'd have some times where it was like normally the loads would take 20 hours too long, and then we'd have one where the load was 17 hours short. And we're like, well, why did that happen? And they would tell us later, oh, that's because that was a touch-up load. They actually just did a batch to finish heating something up, that was it. So they have these odd outlier situations that you can't consider.
And then, so what did we learn? So the main thing that I learned was patience. You can ask Chris and Erika. I had technology issues pretty much every week that we were at Loop Resolve. They gave us laptops, and mine just would not work for me. And so they would give me another one, and it still wouldn't work, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. So just kind of waiting on that was kind of an inconvenience. So working around that. And then communication skills. We actually had to discuss with Joe and Linda a lot about what our ideas were and what we were coming up with, and if we were, if we were on the right track, if this is what they truly wanted. And also just communicating with Chris and Erika, because we all have different ideas, we all, we think differently, so coming up with an overall consensus that would work for our project. And then Google Sheets. I had not really used Google Sheets prior to this. I used it for like a week when we did the technology class. That was like the only time that I've used it. So using it for this long a time, and then just professionalism in general. We were in a business setting, we had to be professional, and then just data analysis as well.
So I would definitely just repeat a lot of the things she said. The most important thing I think we learned was adaptability. So when we did our midpoint check-in, it was actually 2 weeks late because they were busy. So we had 3 weeks left, and they told us, hey, we actually asked you to use the wrong data. So can you redo pretty much everything you did really quick? So that was like, we had to be flexible and we had to adapt, but we got through everything and we still gave them some final numbers. And just like seeing that compounding snowball effect of, if we fix your recipe once, but then you do 1,000 batches a year, how much money that actually saves them was kind of cool, real world context.
And then I also learned a lot about Google Sheets. I had done just the regular standard plugging things and doing functions, but just taking it to the whole new level when you have 50,000 rows of data, which actually Google Sheets can't do because it has a minimum, so Excel's better for that. But also, since Google Classroom is becoming a lot more prevalent in schools, I think really getting a good understanding and how to use the different components that can go into Google Classroom, like Google Sheets, will really help me in the future. And then also just data analysis in the real world. So obviously I knew what mean and median and outliers and all that were, but really seeing that in the context of the real world, how to know when to use mean, when to use median based on those different outliers that exist in the real world, and also why those outliers are happening. And then also just a little bit about histograms and how you can really manipulate them to show what you want to do. There's actually a lot of different components that can go into histograms, bandwidth, whether you want to use a frequency histogram or not. So really getting a solid understanding of how to graph with a histogram and how to make it beneficial was really helpful for me. So that is all we have.